We have a very serious problem with journalists trying to defend this chant.
No, I want to clarify. No journalist in this country has defended or supported any crime in this country directed to any citizen in this country.
Can I make a quick response?
We should all be able to agree that any political leader who chants, kill the Boers, kill the farmers, whoever he says he should kill, it's disgusting, it's outrageous, it shouldn't be happening.
The Constitutional Court ruled that this chant, it's not unconstitutional. What must we do as journalists? Must we violate the laws of the country when the highest court in the land
why don't we start?
The vast majority of Donald Trump's political project is that America is under assault, and by that he means white America. And he is completely anti any immigration or any flowing in of people from other parts in the world, whether legal or otherwise, whether it be a student at a university or somebody jumping the border to try and find out.
Well, to be fair, he's not specific. Hang on. Yes,
let me finish.
He hasn't. Hang on a second. No, I can't let you say something without challenging it if I think it's wrong. When you say that he's predominantly aiming this for the white population of America, what has he said that's ever? Well, what's he ever said that suggests that? I've never heard him say, "I want to protect the white people in America." He said, "I want to protect Americans of all kinds, white, black, whatever." You might think that he's ever said it.
Yeah, but Piers, come on, a wink and a nudge is as good as a communication. Let's be real about this.
I don't agree. No, I think it's lazy. I think it's lazy to do that.
No, you haven't even let me finish, though. And in my opinion, Piers, and you're welcome to disagree with me, you can see that everyone who Trump dislikes is either a person of color or a white person who disagrees with them. Those are the only two categories. And for him, under Elon Musk...
that is complete. I'm sorry. That is complete and utter nonsense.
Give me another example, then.
Give me another example.
Guys, so wow, this is just so interesting. So Piers Morgan is on fire, right? Piers Morgan is on fire. I don't know, probably if this show was really to hit at some of the points regarding this whole thing with farm mothers and the chant, but there's this guy Dan Corder. I'll try to now start slowly studying some of his videos, but Dan Corder now is a guy who is really trying to, in his attempt, I think he's trying to find a kind of like balance as a white South African, a balance reporting on this whole issue with farm mothers, this whole issue with the 142 race laws in South Africa and all of that. And it almost appeared as though to Piers Morgan that he was a little bit going to the extreme. So you see in the video I made in the beginning of this video, where Piers Morgan just found it uncomfortable that, Dan Corder, Dan Corder was actually describing the fact that the Trump regime actually has arisen to protect the whites. And when he speaks about to protect, make America first, MAGA, make America great again, Dan Corder seems to, if I'm hearing him correctly, seems to allude to the notion that Donald Trump, when he says make America great again, he's speaking about make America great again for the white Americans. And this was Dan Corder's perspective in this challenge. And so Piers Morgan just couldn't believe that. And he argued and really rose up and told him that, he won't allow him say something that is false, and all of that. And for me, it's really interesting, that I don't know if Dan Corder is aligned to probably this left-wing media sources. I really don't know. But, I think he's also speaking in the line of these same narratives of the left-wing media sources I've been watching in South Africa, to the point where I think there's a point where I think I'll be making in the next video I'll be making anyway. But, they've actually... part of the articles that were shown to President Ramaphosa in the White House when he met Trump, they've actually alluded that, one of those images, right, was actually a picture of carnage that actually took place in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but that President Trump used that as a basis to argue for the presence of white genocide in South Africa. And one of the
on to new fallout now from Donald Trump's contentious Oval Office meeting with South Africa's president earlier this week. During that meeting, President Trump held up some printouts of news articles and images that he claimed were evidence of a genocide against white South Africans. Well, as Reuters reports, one of the images is actually from Reuters video of a mass burial in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It does not depict dead white farmers in South Africa, as Mr. Trump and the White House claimed in front of the South African president and in front of journalists in the White House.
One of the parts I really enjoy about this video is how Ernst Rust then rose up to discombobulate that argument. Ernst Rust, if you watch later closely in this video, Ernst Rust then rose up to actually argue that, and this, I think this critique was also coming from Sophie Mokoena, all right, in the first video, in the first speech she made in my last video. Sophie Mokoena was arguing that Donald Trump's basis for actually assuading or insinuating that there was a white genocide in South Africa was based on an image that was picked from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I really like the fact that some people go deeper to do their homework, because it also was mind-boggling to me that why would President Trump want to pick an image from the Democratic Republic of Congo to sort of like present his basis for the fact that there's a presence of white genocide in South Africa. And so Ernst Rust rose up and actually argued, and probably I'll look for that article anyway. Ernst Rust rose up and actually discombobulated this whole thing from the left wing, arguing that, you know, I think that paper that President Trump, this is now from Ernst Rust, all right? I've not yet made my investigation, but I'll do that after this video. But he argued that President Trump was actually holding an article that was, you know, analyzing a series of events that was happening both in the DRC and in South Africa. And unfortunately, maybe the image that was used on that article was a carnage that was going on in the DRC. But in that article, it was also mentioned some events taking place in South Africa. And this is why Donald Trump actually highlighted that article. So for me, it was really interesting. And so after this video, I've decided I'm going to go back to try to look for that article and what that article was talking about, because it's really important that we're not misled by, you know, the media, that Trump was actually highlighting carnage that was occurring in the DRC as a basis for his argument for white genocide, because that's the perspective the left media, I'm beginning to realize, are coming for Donald Trump, you know, going forward. I think it's a really important research that Ernst Rust did there, really excellent. But anyway, in this video, Piers Morgan really, you know, got off the hook. He just couldn't stand Dan Corder's argument on this whole thing about, you know, President Trump trying to fight for a white, you know, a hegemony of whiteness across the world. And Piers Morgan was arguing that, you know, Keir Starmer is white, but that Keir Starmer's policies and Trump's policies will clash every second, whether night or day, and that argument was not, you know, substantial from Dan Corder. I just thought it was really interesting that, you know, we had an outsider trying to clash with a South African, arguing that President Trump, and these are all white. So for me as a black person, analyzing this thing from far, it's really interesting that all these white guys are trying to analyze series of issues around racism, this very racism that we've all, you know, framed as being something that is from white to black. But it's almost as though this Afrikaner case is now exposing a certain kind of racism that might be white on white. And for me, it's mind-boggling. But let's quickly listen to how Piers Morgan really rose up to really, I think in a way, he slammed Dan Corder's assertion that President Trump's narrative of Make America Great Again, and this narrative about, you know, trying to give more emphasis on the white refugees in South Africa and all that is part of a mandate by the Trump regime to exonerate white hegemony across the world. This is what I'm hearing, if I'm hearing them correctly in my analysis. And, you know, Piers Morgan wasn't having that. Let's watch quickly and share your thoughts, guys. Let's have a robust debate about this in the comments.
Let me bring in Dr. Roots. So your position is that there's a white genocide. So to which I just want to start by saying there were 26,232 murders last year in South Africa, according to the South African Police Service figures. Of those, 44 were killings of people within the farming community, and of those, 8 were farmers. So my obvious question from those statistics alone is, where is the evidence of a white genocide?
Well, thank you, Piers, and I'm glad that you asked the question like that, because I have to be very clear that this has never been my position, that there is a white genocide. Our position is, however, that we have a very serious problem in South Africa with genocidal rhetoric, with politicians chanting, encouraging a white genocide, encouraging this. And unfortunately, I have to add, we have a very serious problem with the legal system protecting people when they chant about genocide, when they chant about exterminating minorities. And unfortunately, I have to add, we have a very serious problem with journalists trying to defend this chant. So it is a serious problem. And there are other crime phenomena as well in South Africa. But what makes the farm attacks particularly unique is a variety of factors. One, that it's happening in disproportionate numbers, because you have to consider the size of the group within context. Secondly, the very, very unique levels, extreme levels of brutality that affect these farmers. And then what also makes this a very unique crime phenomenon is it's the only crime phenomenon that I can think of in the South African context that is actively romanticized and encouraged by politicians, and with regard to which the romanticization thereof is protected by the justice system and defended by journalists.
Okay, Dan Corder, I've been doing a lot of research in the last...
It's not true.
Hang on, Sophie.
I just want to defend the journalist. No, I want to clarify. No journalist in this country has defended or supported any crime in this country directed to any citizen in this country.
Can I make a quick response?
The very same people today who are talking about, they have been saying the justice system in this country is very independent. The Constitutional Court ruled that this chant, it's not unconstitutional. What must we do as journalists? Must we violate the laws of the country when the highest court in the land has made a ruling?
Sophie, sorry to jump in again, but I do want to let...
there's no genocide.
I do want to let the other panellists have a chance to speak. I would just say we should all be able to agree that any political leader who chants, kill the Boers, kill the farmers, whoever he says he should kill, it's disgusting, it's outrageous, it shouldn't be happening. I've taken him on about it directly, Julius Malema, on Twitter. He didn't like it, but you know what? Tough. He's actually calling for people to be killed. And I don't care how long he's done it for, it's completely wrong. What I would say, though, Dan Corder, it's interesting to hear Dr. Root say that he does not support the notion of a white genocide. I'm not really sure that there's any evidence for a white genocide. What there's evidence of, and Johan Rupert made this point, I thought, very powerfully in the Oval Office, is that there's evidence of a massive crime problem, that there are an unbelievable number of murders in South Africa, predominantly of black people, and that's the real crisis that needs to be dealt with.
Totally, Piers. Thank you for having me. So I think that there are three things that we need to just agree that all the data supports and affirms in South Africa. And this comes from independent regulatory bodies, from independent researchers from around the world and in South Africa. The first one is that the vast majority of white South Africans live a better quality of life now than the vast majority of black South Africans currently living will ever be able to live and could dream of living. So that's point one. Point two, crime patterns are absolutely clear across this country. The richer and whiter you are, and usually based on what I've just said, the whiter you are, the richer you are. That's an undeniable correlation based on historical rigging of our economic system during and before apartheid. The richer and whiter you are, the less likely you are to suffer crime, and the poorer and blacker you are, the more likely you are to suffer crime. And then thirdly, there is no evidence of targeted race-based murders in this country. There's not been a single land seizure in this country by the government or others based on race. And I want to speak to what Ernst Rutt said. It's crucial to point out this, that he talks about the particular brutality, allegedly, of farm murders without countenancing the fact that the vast majority of murders in this country affecting all kinds of people are particularly brutal and awful and garish. It's not unique to farm murders. It happens all the time in all communities. It is ghastly and awful. It's not a specific plight of the farmer. And Ernst claims that you need to count like the number of farm murders in line with the proportion of how many people there are. Actually, if you look at the data, farmers, whiter farmers, suffer less crime than black farmers and farmers of color because they are better protected by their wealth, which is often a corollary with their race. It actually turns out that when you count the beans, white farmers are absolutely not being disproportionately sufferers of crime. What really happens, Piers, in farming communities around the country is that in a farming community, there are many poor people for whom the only place that they can gain work is a farm. And the only source of wealth in that area is the farm. And so crime out of necessity to try and steal something to gain wealth, while very regrettable, it makes sense that it happens. It makes sense that it targets the source of wealth, the source of income, and the source of value. That happens all across the country. And there were crime stats that came out, if I can just finish, Piers, because crime stats came out 3 days ago that are super relevant to this. And thank you for the crime stats that you spoke about earlier. But crime stats came out 3 days ago from the first quarter of South Africa this year, 1 Jan to 31 March. There were around 5,700 murders across the country. There were 6 murders involving people who work on farms. 5 of them were people of color. 1 of them was a white person. 2 farm owners died. They're both black. 3 of the farm laborers who died were black, and the 1 white person was a farm dweller. So we are not here to allow the spin of data to make it sound like it is worse to be a white farmer than any other group in this country, because it is simply not true. And SAPS, the South African Police Force, was questioned earlier this year because there were allegations of undercounting farm murders. SAPS went through all of those complaints and found that only 1 of the names of a person who was allegedly murdered in the last year who was involved in a farm had already been counted in the previous quarter of the statistics. The actual group of people who are undercounted in terms of how much they suffer crime are impoverished people and black people, because those are the stories that don't end up with the police and don't end up with the media.
So let me ask you this question, which is why has Donald Trump been lent on, do you think, by so many people, possibly, we assume, including Elon Musk, who's obviously is South African himself. What do you think is going on here to make Donald Trump, President of the United States, take on the South African president in the way that he did?
The vast majority of Donald Trump's political project is that America is under assault, and by that he means white America. And he is completely anti any immigration or any flowing in of people from other parts in the world, whether legal or otherwise, whether it be a student at a university or somebody jumping the border to try and find out.
Well, to be fair, he's not specific. Hang on.
Yes, let me finish.
He hasn't. Hang on a second. No, I can't let you say something without challenging it if I think it's wrong. When you say that he's predominantly aiming this for the white population of America, what has he said that's ever? What's he ever said that suggests that? I've never heard him say, "I want to protect the white people in America." He said, "I want to protect Americans of all kinds, white, black, whatever." You might think that he's ever said it.
Yeah, but Piers, come on, a wink and a nudge is as good as a communication. Let's be real about this.
I don't agree. No, I think it's lazy. I think it's lazy to do that.
No, you haven't even let me finish, though, and this show is called...
Yeah, because you made a statement about Trump I don't think is true.
Okay, so I haven't even finished about why he's obsessing with this. Let me finish my idea, and then you can critique it as much as you like. It is your show. Okay, so Donald Trump largely goes after immigrants, and he criticizes the immigrants who are of color from countries in the world that he calls S-hole countries. I don't know if we can swear on this show, but that was a quote about most African countries.
We're uncensored. Right? Say what you're lying.
Shithole countries. Okay, so but that's a quote from the American president. So what is different about the South African white farmer plight versus all the other refugee programs that he's cancelled, including 10,000 applications that are live and would have reached the fruition of like Afghani people who helped the Americans in Afghanistan getting safe haven in America, is the fact that these are white refugees. There are no white refugees being denied passage from any other country in the world. This fits the narrative that Trump really loves, that there are white people under attack, that the identity of white America is under attack, that they're going to be washed away, the great replacement theory. In my opinion, Piers, and you're welcome to disagree with me, you can see that everyone who Trump dislikes is either a person of color or a white person who disagrees with them. Those are the only 2 categories. And for him, under Elon Musk...
No, that is complete... I'm sorry. That is complete and utter nonsense.
Give me another example,
Why he said Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, should be in jail. Last time I checked, Keir Starmer's white. It's ridiculous. He attacks white people all the time.
I said 2 categories. I said white people who disagree with his politics or people of color.
Keir Starmer disagrees with his politics.
Keir Starmer's been bashed by the MAGA right for so long. And if Keir Starmer doesn't follow Trump's ideas about Ukraine or about Starlink, then Keir Starmer is in his crosshairs. It's as simple as that. It's always been the case.
Right. I think everyone's... Listen, I have been in Trump's crosshairs after the last interview we did. He didn't talk to me for 6 months. Last time I checked, I'm white. It's fine. He whacks anyone... He whacks anybody that has a go at him. Anyway, let me